There are chocolatiers, which most people familiar with because they make all of this amazing, beautiful things out of chocolate. And there is chocolate makers. And chocolate makers are actually the ones who take the cacao beans and they turn it into the chocolate mass, which then they just solidify and sell to chocolatiers. Most of the time, chocolate makers have no interest in crafting chocolate, and chocolatiers know nothing about chocolate making. So very rarely you get both. And usually it's with like a bean to bar kind of boutique chocolate shops. Well, so I started looking for the chocolate that I can craft going into chocolatier round. But the truth of the matter was most of the chocolate that was clean, that the ingredients were compliant with my lifestyle, was completely unpalatable. And it was unpalatable not because it was not sweet enough. It was too sweet.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's very easy to mess up a chocolate on a sugar substitute when you don't know what you're doing. And then anything that was actually really palatable and you'd be like, but okay, this is decent. Then you look at the ingredients. Like we have this brand called Unreal, and it's like little 4 squares, maybe 12 grams, and they have like 6 grams of sugar. And I'm like, there's nothing unreal about that. Totally real. Makes sense. Yes, it's not 8 grams of sugar, but it's still a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, my daily allowance is about 12 to 15 grams of carbs from all sources.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that includes like vegetables and maybe an occasional fruit, but it's not a lot. Like a couple of those Unreal candies and I can't eat anything. And so I started to think, well, where do you get cacao beans from? How do they grow? And we went to Costa Rica and we found a farm, a cacao farm, and the farmer was very generous to show us what cacao beans look like and what their taste like. And by the way, cacao is a fruit, and it has this white pulp that surrounds the beans, which are the seeds, and it's very sweet with chocolatey aftertaste. It's amazing. It's amazing to eat. And so I started to learn that actually a good cacao is a fermented product. So once they pick the cacao beans, they take the skins off, and skin is very thick, and they ferment the beans similar to coffee in the pulp of the cacao, and all of the fruity notes and sweetness and all of these different flavors actually infuse into a bean through the pulp that was once surrounding it. And so usually a fermentation process is between 3 and 7 days, depending on what you're trying to do. And then they dry it. And then they either roast it or they send it to the chocolate maker, and the chocolate maker has the roasters and continues to prepare the chocolate to become the final product. Unfortunately, what happens most of the time is those cacao beans get very, very processed. And the reason for that is any cacao bean is at least 55% cacao butter. And cacao butter is very, very expensive commodity. It's very sought after in cosmetic industry, in different chemical industries. So if you take the beans, for example, out of Cameroon or Ghana, and they're around $2 a kilo, or like $1 a pound. When you press out that cacao butter, then that cacao butter can be sold for $20 a pound.
Right.
or $40 a kilo.
Mm.
So you can see how it's a lucrative trade, right, to do processing of these ingredients, but then you are left with nearly dry powder. So in order to make chocolate out of it, now you need to reconstitute the fats. And the fats that usually being reconstituted for is hydrogenated vegetable fats, such as hydrogenated palm oil, which is poison, or like hydrogenated different vegetable oils, which is also poison. But it gets solid. But it doesn't get solid quite like the cacao butter, because cacao butter is actually polymorphic saturated fat, and when it's at the room temperature, it's really like a rock. It snaps. You have to use a pretty thick blade to shed it off if you get it in a block. Vegetable oils would never be that solid. They're kind of margarine solid. And so the ultra-processed chocolate industry adds a whole bunch of ingredients to make it solid and palatable, but they add things like soy lecithin. They call it an emulsifier, but in reality, it's a detergent. So every time you eat processed chocolate and it contains soy lecithin, it does to the GI tract and the intestines exactly like what the detergent does. And I when I have the tastings, like play with your food kind of type of tastings here at the factory, at my chocolate factory.
If you are enjoying this episode, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments.
I let them get and squirt a little bit of soy lecithin into water and shake the bottle, and they would see all of the little bubbles that you get when you add the detergent to things.
Wow.
So anyways, I wanted none of that. I wanted to stay healthy and beat my cancer and never be bothered by it again. So I started to reach out to all of these different cacao farmers, and first of all, asking them about their practices. What I wanted to have is absolute natural organic cacao. Means without pesticides, without any kind of additives. The trouble in the world of growing cacao is actually there is a fungal disease that kills the fruit, not the tree, but the fruit that's on the tree. And so what usually happens if farmer lets it go too long and it's organic, that within 12 hours, the fruit would be covered in this real thin white film, which would be a fungal growth. And what's inside would be ruined, so they would not be able to use it anymore.
Right.
So the majority of cacao is commodity that's grown in Africa. Africa grows about 75% of all cacao trades, and that's between Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Cameroon. They have crops that are genetically engineered. So they can spray them, dust them, not worry about letting them grow too long. But there is another problem with that, which recently surfaced, is because all of those pesticides that they're being sprayed with are full with heavy metals like lead and cadmium. And it's actually been known since way back in 2008, the American Confectionery Association has issued a memo that, guys, you need to do something about all of this cadmium and lead in the soil, because when we refine the chocolate, it breaks them apart into particles and it releases all of those heavy metals, and people get toxic effect. Like you get the headaches or, the vertigos and things like that after eating chocolate. Like you're supposed to feel good, but you feel heavy because the symptoms of heavy metal poisoning. So being aware of all of that, of course, this is pre-seamless treats. I'm still trying to solve my own problem. I was like, I want to have the most organic cacao beans that I can lay my hands on.
The Founders Unplugged podcast, hosted by Greg McCallum. Raw, uncensored conversations with startup founders.